know who the Beatles were. We'd never heard of them. And that night, I booked Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and John Lennon for 3 shows for $10,000.
And that was the beginning, of course, for John Lennon, and I'm sure you have all heard by now that the sudden end came last night as he was gunned down outside of his New York apartment. In fact, it's been covered pretty thoroughly on the news. So we thought it would be a good idea to spend our time tonight talking about the contributions of John Lennon, both to the music world and to the rest of the world. So we've asked a couple of folks who know quite a bit about the subject to help out. On the far right is Mick Martin, who's the movie and music critic for the Sacramento Union, and Dennis Newhall, who is the who is the program director of radio station KCRA-FM. Let's start out first. I'll start with you, Mick. When was the first time you ever heard the Beatles? Is it a memorable moment, something?
Oh yes, it was a typically boring Sunday night before school, watching a typically boring Ed Sullivan show with the elephants and all of that. And then the Beatles came on, and I had heard about them, heard the music on the radio. I wasn't very impressed, but seeing them, it was really something.
And Mitzi Gaynor was the headliner that night. That was the funny thing about it. Remember, they were all excited about meeting her. How about you, Dennis? When did you first?
I didn't notice it. It was on AM radio somewhere along the line, and I didn't even pay any attention. I wondered what all the hype was about until probably the time Hard Day's Night came out.
Oh, really? You were, who was your big group that you were crazy about?
The Beach Boys were huge here in Sacramento, but I got into the Beatles after going to the Fox Theater, and you couldn't hear the first half hour of A Hard Day's Night for all the screaming.
First time I heard the Beatles, Jack Parr had a film that somebody had sent him from England. It says, here's what these guys look like with their haircuts. Now that's the Beatles. You may never see them again. So long. You know how Jack was. Anyway, a few years ago, Weeknight Steve LaRosa put together a story on John Lennon which featured Lennon's album Rock and Roll Music. And we resurrected that film because we thought it would give you an idea of not only the type of music that Lennon wrote, but the artists who originally influenced his music as well. And that was a little story that Steve LaRosa put together about, I guess, a year or so ago. Now, I got to ask you guys this. You've been hearing on the news that the folks have been rushing to the record stores to buy John Lennon's latest album and also Beatle albums. Why the mad dash? Those albums are always going to be around, aren't they?
Probably just the emotion of the moment, because they'll start printing them up by the millions now. All the stores will be stocking them up like they did Elvis.
Mm-hmm. I think there are a few people who honestly believe that these records are suddenly going to be rare. I can't figure it out. There was one fellow who said he went down about 20 copies of the new album because he said you're not going to be able to get them anymore. Mm-hmm. And I can't figure that one out.
The same thing happened with Elvis, more or less, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
The stores are all short on them now. You can hardly find, well, you can find no John Lennon albums and very few Beatle records.
Yeah, the Beatle records are almost all gone.
But in a month, they'll be back. Well, in a moment, we're going to take a look at the Lennon influence on the recording business.
The name Beatles, and what does it really mean?
John thought of the name Beatles, and he'll tell you about it now. It means Beatles, doesn't it? You know, that's just a name, you know, like shoe.
Okay, now we're going to find out some more about the Beatles and John Lennon, we hope. Was John Lennon the most important Beatle? You hear that Paul McCartney was. Some people say that George Harrison was really the
John was the spokesman for the group. He was always the leader. I think he was the one with the message and the most moral. When I relate to Paul McCartney, I always think of him as the cute one who wrote the nice love songs,
mm-hmm.
the Penny Lanes. But it was John Lennon who told us that all we needed was love.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, these days, Paul McCartney is certainly the more famous, more well-known, and is making a lot more money, but John chose to hide out for 5 years. I still think, though, in regards to the Beatles, that John was certainly the main driving force, and he didn't choose to be the leader, but everybody used to ask who's the leader of the Beatles, and they got so tired of saying, well, nobody, mm-hmm. that John just sort of took over the job.
And he was also always under the pressure to be the intellectual Beatle. You remember how they were typed when they first came out, the cute
books.
Beatle?
He wrote books, folks.
And he wrote the books.
Yeah, this was the writing Beatle, John Lennon. Can you see that? This is one of his many in his own right, and then he wrote a Spaniard in the Works. In fact, if I have time, I may read you something from this one. He had some pretty humorous stuff in here. Also, Dennis, you brought some things that are really collector's items now. He had some strange albums, wouldn't you say?
When Yoko and he got together, a series of 3 albums came out that weren't really that listenable before the Beatles
They weren't listenable at all.
Not at all.
Not at all, huh? This is the wedding album, isn't it? Okay. Now let me show you what happens when you open
Lots
this
of goodies inside.
There's the wedding license, right?
Right.
This is an exact copy of he and Yoko's wedding license?
Right.
Okay.
Right. This is the album, and one side is a lot of press conference from the week that they spent in bed in Amsterdam talking about peace, The other side of the album is about 22 minutes of John, Yoko, John, Yoko, in various
It's sort of like
degrees
John and
of
Mary.
excitement.
We have a postcard of them together.
A picture of the wedding cake
In a bag.
in a bag, which
Picture of the wedding cake. And
that had some significance back then.
quite a
too.
sense of humor to it. Let's see. And then we have, we have this book.
Press clippings.
Oh, press clippings of all this stuff. This is just inside an album. Can you buy this album anymore?
Not anymore.
This is gone. This
You
is
can get it in Japanese imports, but these American ones are quite expensive.
the pictures they took at the Penny Arcade together. Can you imagine all this stuff in an album?
And more posters and press clippings and things like that. Here's pictures of the wedding itself. This was so all their fans could share in their happiness.
Nick, we were talking about there was also a breakthrough in the way they did things in
In the recording studio.
in the studio
Right.
recording.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, because there's been so many advances made. People are so used to listening to sophisticated recordings. Don't realize that most rock and roll back in the 60s was recorded on a 4-track machine. The Beatles were the first group to take 2 4-track machines, put them together, synchronize them, and that became Sgt. Pepper. After that, the whole concept of artistry in the studio, beyond just recording live music, opened up. You could overdub vocals, put an extra vocal on, change a guitar part, and a lot of that was because of the Beatles.
And they went through a lot of changes from I Love You, Ya Ya to Sgt. Pepper to on to...
A lot more meaningful music.
Right. All right. I actually met, believe it or not, I met John Lennon. It was very briefly. I was covering the Cannes Film Festival in France with Bud Harmon, and there was a crowd of paparazzi photographers going down the street, and sure enough, there was John and Yoko. My cameraman had only about 50 feet of film left in the camera. I immediately walked right up to John to say hello, because I was so shocked to even see him. I was not expecting him at all, but here now is that priceless piece of film with me talking to John Lennon and Yoko on it. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
Fine. Nice to
Well,
see you here.
what's
I'm from America.
Oh, are you?
Yes.
How are you, America?
Fine. We came over to say hello. How's everything doing?
Yes,
Fine.
beautiful. We love it here.
What's happening?
Huh?
What's happening?
Oh, this is for a little
How's
American
the
news.
people?
Nice to see you. News conference tomorrow afternoon?
Oh, yeah, I believe there is one, yeah.
Huh.
So we'll see you there, I suppose.
Right.
After you're going to see the movies, are you?
You're right. What's the name of your picture we're supposed to get?
Mine's called Apotheosis, and hers is called Fly. Fly was made in New York.
Oh.
Hi, New York. How are you doing?
Okay, well,
Let's do it.
thank you very much.
Hello, hello.
Thank you,
Is that
John.
okay? We'll see you tomorrow then.
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bong. Bong.
Don't forget the Beatle boycott is still in effect. We haven't forgotten what the Beatles said.
We meant more to kids than Jesus did, or religion at that time. I wasn't knocking it or putting it down, I was just saying it as a fact.
Will you now stop speaking out against the war because of
No, nothing will stop me, and whether I'm here or wherever I may be.
A lot of people say that John Lennon was quoted out of context a lot. In fact, I got a call tonight where somebody said, when he says, we're more famous than Jesus Christ, what he meant was it's kind of a shame that we're more famous. And how do you see it?
It was more of an observation on his part. I think it was a simple statement of fact. They were very, very popular. Their influence was very widespread. There was a fanaticism connected with the Beatles that certainly...
They used to grab the grass where they walked, remember that?
Right, or tear up their sheets, yes. I mean, but I think it was at that point that John Lennon realized what power he had and what weight, what he said carried. And that was when I think he changed and realized that he couldn't be as flip and cute as he was at one time, because something like that could happen and people could take it wrong.
A lot of people really did follow him, right, Dennis? You think, for good or for bad, in which way?
Well, in any case, they were appealing to a younger audience, and I think we're all looking for heroes at that age. We needed one. The Beatles were one. John stood out as a spokesman for the Beatles, so everybody looked up to him, and every word he said, we followed one way or another, at least listened to. I think they took that power after a while, started to realize it was there, and poured more of it into their music, and pulled away from the press, quit touring. That's when the record started meaning more. Sgt. Pepper and the White Album and everything else, the lyrics were a little more meaningful.
Yeah, I Love You, Ya Ya turned into...
A Day in the Life.
That's right, and you couldn't dance to them anymore after a while, too.
They still had some good rock and roll dance tunes, though. John Lennon always made sure that there was plenty of reverb, hard rock and roll.
Okay, well, when you get right down to it, the influence of John Lennon spanned an entire generation. And tonight, dozens of Sacramentans are remembering the artist with a candlelight vigil at Plaza Park, and Weeknight Steve LaRosa is there. Steve?
Well, to quote John Lennon, images of broken light which dance before me like a million eyes. They call me on and on across the universe. And there's not quite a million lights left out here anymore, but the crowd's starting to thin out. I'm here with Tom Cale and Alan Alvin of KCRA-TV, who was the start of this thing this morning on their radio show. Guys, tell me very briefly how this thing got started.
It was real obvious when we showed up at 6 o'clock this morning, after talking to people for a couple of hours, things had to be done to vent some steam, some anger, some frustration, and through a number of different conversations with people at the station and on the phone, we decided that, like any other situation, when you lose a loved one, you got to get together with your friends, and these are the friends here. And compared to how we felt this morning, everybody now feels fine.
Alan?
Basically, well, you can see how everybody feels here. We just decided that there was one thing we wanted to say, and we decided we had a way to get people to say it, and that was that we love John Lennon and to give peace a chance.
Well, to quote John Lennon one more time, though I'll never lose affection for people and things that came before, I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I've loved them all, and I think there's a lot of people here tonight that love John Lennon. Let's go back to the show.
How did you find America?
Turn up to Greenland. I hope the young kids like it as well, but I'm really talking to the people that grew up with me. I'm saying, here I am now. How are you? How's your relationship going? Did you get through it all? Wasn't the 70s a drag, you know? Here we are, well, let's try and make the 80s good, you know? Because it's still up to us to make what we can of it.
That was John Lennon in an excerpt from an interview done only yesterday for RKO Radio Network, and the interview will be broadcast in its entirety this Sunday on radio station KWOD in Sacramento. I believe he was talking about his new album there. All right, there's some couple of quotes I think we should give it this time. It has to do, you have a quote that you said you'd like to mention, Mick.
Well, the only reason for that, I think, there's a sadness to it in a way. As everyone knows, John Lennon was left with his aunt by his parents when he was young, and he really wanted to spend time with Sean, his son. Mm-hmm. And that's why he didn't record for the last 5 years. He really wanted his son to have a father.
He became a house husband.
Mm-hmm.
Yoko was never there. I mean, for all intents and purposes, he raised Sean.
And last night, when I received a call and found out about his death, I happened to open the album, and I opened it to Beautiful Boy and read the lyrics, "Close your eyes, have no fear, the monster's gone, he's on the run, and your daddy's here."
Mm-hmm. He wrote some great stuff, and he had a great sense of humor, as you can tell just from that little excerpt I had with him, where he was just playing around, a very friendly guy. And I was going to read something in a lighter vein. I'm sure John Lennon would like all of us to have smiles on our faces. This is the Good Dog Nigel, should have my from the writing Beatle, John Lennon in his own right. Arf, arf, he goes, a merry sight, our little hairy friend. Arf, arf, upon the lamppost bright, arfing round the bin. Nice dog, goo boy, waggy tail and beg. Clever Nigel, jump for joy, because we're putting you to sleep at 3 o'clock. Anyway, that was one of John Lennon's writings. I want to thank Mick Martin for being with us on this special show for John Lennon, and also Dennis Newhall of KROY, Sacramento Union, Mick Martin. That about does it for this edition of Weeknight, and we certainly hope you've enjoyed spending the past half hour with us, remembering John Lennon in a real good way. And we'll be seeing you tomorrow on Weeknight. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and God bless you. You've got a lucky face. The end.